Hello everyone, this is my second YouTube video, and it is the second in a series of videos that I'm creating on Asperger's Syndrome, which is a condition on the autism spectrum, and it is a condition I was diagnosed with just last week. If you haven't seen my first video yet, I encourage you to check that out. In that video, I speak on my reactions to the diagnosis, as well as my thoughts and criticisms on the methods of diagnosis, which for me included a questionnaire, and that was one major factor in me getting diagnosed. I share my thoughts on that, as well as my thoughts on what I intend to do with the knowledge that I received from my diagnosis. So if you haven't checked that video out yet, I encourage you to take a look at that one. In this one, it's probably going to be a two-part video, but I'm going to be discussing the traits and attributes that I possessed throughout childhood, which were most likely indicators of Asperger's syndrome. Like I said, it's probably going to go into two parts because I did possess a lot of the characteristics that are common indicators of Asperger's. Um, I'm not going to speak in depth on the social aspects, even though that is a major uh, portion of it. Um, if I spoke on the social aspects, you know, we could be here for a while. So I'm going to save that for another video so I can really go in depth, because I certainly do have a lot of stories to tell about social experiences throughout childhood and the triumphs and failures therein, but like I said, that's a different video for a different day. Uh, but as for this video, I'm also not going to go into my recent history, because again, that could take far too long, and I'm going to save that also for another video. So this video is mainly going to focus on my childhood years. For those who haven't seen my first video, I am 26 years old, so this is going back significantly. Some of it's a little fuzzy, but a lot of it's not. I still remember it pretty well. But going back to the earliest years, I really don't have many memories of those, but I do have the home videos, and after observing myself on the home videos, one trait that I had during the early years was kind of an awkward way of speaking. Um, Now I know that most children aren't going to be speaking overly eloquent, and I certainly wasn't the case, but just my pattern of speech was very over-enunciated. Like if I said I want to go outside in the backyard, it would be something like, I want to go outside in the backyard. They're just really over-enunciated words, and just, looking on those videos, it did seem a little awkward, even though, I know I was a child, but it just seemed a little different. And, my parents admit that too. They say that my speech was, you know, pretty different from my peers. Um, Another trait that I possessed back then and still possess has to do with my motor skills. I was never into sports or anything like that, and probably one reason was because I had really bad, I guess, hand-eye coordination. Um, I, it was very difficult for me to catch things, like catching a basketball or football. I couldn't do any kind of sports like that, and I think one reason was because, you know, I couldn't catch things, and, I wasn't athletic at all. You know, I remember I tried ice skating for a while, but could never quite get the hang of it just because I guess my balance, dexterity, something, it just was different. And, another thing, this is still true, my walk was a little, uh, it's been described as a little bit bouncy. Like when I walk, um, I tend to bounce. I guess you could say I've got rhythm, but, you know, I never noticed it until people pointed it out to me. And, again, just, it's not overly exaggerated or anything, but I just have a slight bounce when I walk. Um, but anyway, going back to elementary, middle school years, I always made good grades. I was pretty much above average in terms of that. I was a salutatorian for my middle school. Um, I think I had probably close to, if not a 4.0 GPA when I graduated middle school, but keep in mind the bar is not being set that high because I went to a private school and there were probably 20 to 25 people in my grade, so really isn't saying much, but compared to those other 20, 25 people, I was pretty much at the top, if not close to the top. And I was salutatorian, so I guess that's second place. Um, as far as my interests were concerned back then, that was a little peculiar. Like I mentioned, I wasn't into sports or any kind of social type activities that the other kids were into. But what I would do in my spare time was map out video game levels on paper. Like I would just draw these complex mazes in the format of like levels that you would see in Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario World, all those Mario games for the Super Nintendo, regular Nintendos, what we were into back then. But yeah, I would just draw out these incredibly complex levels, and I had stacks upon stacks of these, and I don't know why I was so interested in it. I mean, I guess I kind of stopped after a couple of years. I don't do it anymore, but back then that was really, really important to me, and I just continued to do it throughout so many years, and then just quit for I don't know why. Um, but another thing about me that is still true is my skin. My skin is very sensitive. Uh, it's sensitive to temperature, and it's sensitive to heat and sunlight, and it's always been like that. And every time we would go out for recess, I would go and sit in the shade because I hated sunlight, still hate sunlight. And, again, when it would get cold, um, I would have to bundle up because just drastic changes in temperature or any kind of extreme hot or cold, I pick up on very easily. So, if anyone who's riding in a car with me will say that I always have my hand, on the AC. I'm always changing it constantly because, I'm so sensitive to that. But looking at my clock now, I can see that I'm almost at the 10-minute mark. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video and redirect you to part 2, which I'll talk more about the physical characteristics that I possessed during childhood, which were most likely indicators of Asperger's Syndrome, which I was diagnosed with last week. So check out part 2.